thank you for joining us at the Payments Canada Summit panel discussion this morning on cryptocurrency. And the subject for this session is how cryptocurrency can be used to facilitate money laundering, trade sanction avoidance, and tax evasion. And we have with us a great panel of speakers. We have Anand from Deloitte. We have Rodney McInnes from Outlier, who has an amazing title to Compliance Ninja. I love that. And we have Sergeant Alex Barron from Canadian Police College. And cryptocurrency is on the front page almost daily now, and people are starting to sort of wake up and pay more attention to it. And you really can't ignore the growing popularity of this form of currency, and particularly we see it popping up in the criminal element. Ransomware extortion has become viable because Bitcoin can be used or demanded by the extortionists to pay to release data. And so we're seeing this cryptocurrency being used in the criminal world. We're also seeing it being used in very legitimate ways. So what we want to do is sort of discuss how it is being used and why and the problems with the use of it for money laundering and tax evasion and things like that. So why don't I'm going to ask the speakers all to introduce themselves so you can know a bit about them.
You go first.
Sure, Anand. I feel like half the people on that side can't see us, so maybe since it might not be full, if you guys want to move over, it might be easier. But Anand with Deloitte. I help clients with financial crime, primarily in the financial services industry, and I've been working on blockchain for the last 2 years as part of a blockchain fellows program with Deloitte, where we share ideas for blockchain, including cryptocurrency, globally across our practice.
My name is Rodney McInnes. I'm with Outlier Solutions. We're a boutique anti-money laundering consulting firm. We help usually medium to smaller businesses deal with kind of some of the headaches around AML. I've been in the Bitcoin space since about 2013, which has turned into the blockchain space, which has turned into the security token space, which has turned into the stablecoin space.
That's good. My name is Alex Barron. I'm with the RCMP. I'm currently teaching the Canadian Police College. And basically my role is to try to wake up the police community of what they need to know about cryptocurrency and seizure. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I forgot to introduce myself. This is early in the morning. I'm Ruth Promislow. I'm a partner at the law firm Bennett Jones. My practice focuses on privacy, data protection issues, and of course in that practice, cryptocurrency pops up as a common theme, particularly because I mentioned I deal with ransomware threats frequently, and so that's where I see it popping up the most. That's how the criminals sort of get away with extorting the money in exchange for the return of data. So before we sort of get started, I want to have a sense of sort of where we're at in this room. So how many people would say, can you put up your hands if you say you know about cryptocurrency? Okay. And how many of those people do you own any cryptocurrency? Okay. And maybe we'll just do a brief, a few minutes just on how it works, because I wanted to make sure we didn't dive into this discussion without there being a foundation understanding of how it works. So maybe, Jazz, can you just give us, seeing how many hands were put up about how they know about it, but just to maybe a summary, a primer on how it works.
Sure. So cryptocurrency, I guess the most common one is Bitcoin. Essentially is a peer-to-peer exchange system that allows two people to transact with each other without knowing each other or trusting each other. And that entire transaction is facilitated by a protocol as opposed to a central bank or a central authority. That protocol has some rules, and those rules are codified into a blockchain. And that essentially allows me to be able to transact with Ruth, for example. Actually, I prefer her sending me money. So Ruth can send me money. And how it works for a consumer is it's just almost like a QR code or an address. You have a public address and you have a private address. Private address is your password. So all of you, those of you who put your hands up and said you had coins, if you need help with those private keys, send them to me, and I'll make sure they're safe. But essentially, that is your password. It's like your PIN to your credit card. And then your public key is how you send and receive money. So for me to receive money from Ruth, I wouldn't have to give her my password. I would just show her my public address. She would use her phone or other device, scan that address, and as long as she has funds in her account, she can send those funds directly to me. Currently takes anywhere between 5 to 20 minutes for the transaction to occur, and that speed really does vary on volume and what's happening in the market. But it's instantaneous in that it does happen within a few minutes. Yeah. Anything you guys wanted to add?
No,
Okay.
it's good.
So, we know not all cryptocurrencies are the same. So what I wanted to talk, maybe Rodney, you could just tell us, what are the differences that you see in the different cryptocurrencies available?
In the cryptocurrency space specifically, so Bitcoin again being kind of the most commonly known, the blockchain, like the Bitcoin blockchain, is a public ledger. Anybody can look at it. It's very easy to kind of see where funds are flowing, even though it's done pseudonymously. So your public address is the only thing that's listed on the blockchain. It doesn't have your identity, your anything like private information about you. Then you get into kind of some of the privacy coins like Monero, Zcash, stuff like that. Their blockchain is technically public, but it's hidden. So if you go to look at their blockchain, there's nothing there. It's all encrypted, and in order to look at the transaction, you need to have the keys involved in that transaction. With Ethereum, you get more of a world computer that is kind of deemed as programmable money at this point. Short of that.
Okay. And Alex, would you add anything, differences you see among the different currencies?
Well,
Cryptocurrencies?
obviously some of them right now, the ledger or the blockchain is visible and we can see what's going on, but we cannot identify who's behind it, as Jazz mentioned. And as you mentioned, the Zcash and Monero is very, very hard to even have what's going on behind that. So we have a lot of challenge. Even the tools to basically look at it have their own limitation, and we look at chain analysis and those like that. You talk about 20 grand to 60 grand for a full suite of software. So you can imagine for a small police force, they cannot afford that type of thing. So we need to work in collaboration.
So is there any way, for cryptocurrency, it was almost easier sort of chasing a crook because money always leaves a trail. So you deal with the banks and you can see the money hopping from one account to another, and you could trace assets around the world and identify the wrongdoer. And now with crypto in the world of commercial fraud, so it's sort of throwing a wrench into it. So is there a way, are there certain ones that are better at allowing you to trace who is behind a particular account?
Not really. It's again, it's go back to the basic, placement, integration, layering phase of all those. It's traditional policing, but we just need to basically make the investigator on the civil side or the police side aware what they need to look for and how they can identify those indicators.
So you're sort of putting together pieces of a puzzle to create as clear a picture as possible? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of the time it's open source. People leave trace. They're going to leave their moniker to other website, and then we can identify them. So.
Okay. And Jazz, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, from a technical perspective, the protocol is fully transparent. So every single transaction is stored on a blockchain, and it cannot be changed, and there's multiple copies of it. So there is a single version of the truth. The problem is, when funds are stolen, it's sort of like neighborhood watch. When the crooks come in and steal your house, and all the neighbors watch, and then they leave, and then the police show up, and the neighbors like, yeah, I saw the whole thing. That's sort of what's going on. Money was stolen from Mt. Gox, 400 million coins. Everybody's watching it. Like when I say stolen, it was moved from the people who had the keys to other people. We all see where it is. You can go in there and look at it yourself. The whole Bitcoin database is 250 gig. Like you could download it with a laptop computer bought from the store. Anybody can see that. So there's full transparency in the protocol, but the problem really lies in identifying the people behind the public keys. And that's really where the efficiency for money laundering exists. It's not so much in the design of the technology, because the technology does allow full transparency. I think it's how criminals choose to use the technology and how they hide their identities behind the public keys. Yeah.
And Rodney, what do you think about that? You think there are, in so the landscape of cryptocurrencies, are there better or worse ones in terms of trying to track down the wrongdoer and attribute a particular account to that wrongdoer?
I think with the exception of some of the privacy coins, Monero, Zcash, PivX, stuff like that, the tracking of the coins is fairly easy because it's all public.
Yeah.
The struggle lies in connecting that to the person. But as you, kind of to Jazz's point of like the self-policing within the industry, so I don't know if anybody heard, but like last week I think it was, Binance got hacked for $40 million, 7,000 Bitcoin. I was talking to Blockchain Intelligence Group, which is a blockchain analysis tool, and this was the following day, and that morning at the conference, they sat in the back and within 5 hours had traced all of the Bitcoin to the address where it was currently sitting. And what they can do at that point, so there's actually a Twitter account that called Whale Alerts or something like that. And they've put out basically a bot that if those coins move from that wallet, they'll put out an alert. And so anybody running an exchange very easily can kind of put that address on their blacklist. So it's difficult to tie it to a physical person, but it is possible to kind of put roadblocks in place as far as moving those coins, getting them out, exchanging them into fiat, and actually using them.
But if you can associate, you can see the Bitcoin moving to an account, and you can say that based on the conduct, that account is associated to a wrongdoer. But so in the old days, we used to go to the court and get a freezing order to lock down that bank account, and then we get an order that all the proceeds should be paid to the victim of the fraud. So how do you, so you know it's in an account, then what?
Not much. You kind of put up the roadblocks on the other side so that
to make it difficult for them to move it around.
Exactly. The benefit of the hack and getting your money out becomes extremely difficult.
Okay.
And I think the problem with money laundering here is you cannot stop them from moving the money around.
Yeah.
So, the advantage of money launderers having Bitcoin is that they have their own enterprise that they have to pay. And everyone's worried about fiat. The criminals aren't. They can pay each other in crypto. And it's the other person's problem to convert it to fiat. And really the big problem in the industry is the exchanges right now. So these exchanges are not, in some instances, well-regulated organizations that can exist anywhere in the world and can change your crypto to fiat currency. And so, the KYC policies that you have as financial institutions, the exchange that just popped up with 3 people as the owners, in the Caribbean may not have that same rigor that you have in validating people. And so there's always going to be good and bad exchanges, and exchanges go down all the time. There's currently numerous exchanges that are, being sued and in the courts in the U.S. because, they've done exactly that. Maybe not purposefully. Maybe they've just implemented poor policies and the criminals have taken advantage of it. But the real problem is not getting money into a fiat because criminals have their own enterprises where they can launder the money to different criminal networks without any detection.
So I just want to pick up on that. So you have your money in the cryptocurrency and you want to get it out. So you go to an exchange. And there's a variety of exchanges. I want to just talk a bit about those exchanges and are there differences among them and what are the regulations imposed on them, if any, and what controls are there for how they conduct their transactions?
Yeah, so just like, we talked about cryptocurrencies and we said, there's safe ones and bad ones. There's very bad ones and there's very, very safe ones. I think there was 1,700 coins launched last year, and we're talking about 5 or 6 here that we're saying are safe. Majority of the coins out there are bad. I think there was a white paper released with Ryan Reynolds' picture on it, and it was called Do Not Invest Coin, and it was an example to try and teach people not to invest. They raised $7 million. And so there's a lot of bad behavior just in launching coins. But if you get past that and you say there are some good coins out there, the bad behavior is really in the exchanges. Because these exchanges are setting themselves up in any country, anywhere in the world, and abiding by the rules of that country. But cryptocurrency has no country. So I could go to the country that has the best rules and change that to fiat, and once it's fiat, I can convert it to any currency I need. And all of the regulation will be based on that small place that has just opened an exchange, which could be 6 guys in a 50 square foot store. So that's really the problem. And they're not very well regulated, and regulation takes a long time to catch up to them. They only need to be open for 6 months to a year for all the launderers to get their money converted into fiat. And then they disappear.
And Alex, maybe you can take us through, just to sort of pick up on this, how is cryptocurrency being used for money laundering and tax evasion?
Well, most of the cases that we see, it's, people use it currently for the darknet market, basically buying illegal goods. 2/3 of the darknet market, that's what they do. So if they just transfer that money, as Jazz mentioned, is that they don't need to get it as fiat money. But even when we try to trace that, and they get an alert, all that, the problem is at the exchanger level that you can even go and have a tumbler and mixer. Then even worse, you exchange to another cryptocurrency. Then now those that you can trace with the tools that we have, then we lose completely trace of it, and it look like clean. Gambling illegal site is a good example of that, what they do just to try to hide their money. And basically it's going to look like a windfall, say, hey, I win that money legally, but it's not. We know that some people kind of abuse of even the exchange, like an ATM, and there's one in Canada right now that an ATM machine is behind a bar, and it's for a criminal organization, and they said the exchange, they have a fee of 40%. So they can claim that, hey, it's a good money because we charge that, and we don't look at who's using it. Well, it's themselves who are using it. We know that. So, but it's to prove it is the difference. It's difficult.
And Rodney, where do you see crypto being used for the criminal activity, and how?
On the money laundering side, there's a very interesting model that's related to mining. So you could use your ill-gotten proceeds of crime to purchase mining equipment and then mine new Bitcoin. And as soon as you mine that new Bitcoin, that's as clean can be. There's zero trace where that came from, and it's the actual mining equipment that is purchased illegally. That's one of the more interesting ones I've seen that is really difficult to deal with.
Yeah, and that's really because criminals now place their premium on clean coins. So when you want to trade in the bad marketplace, you don't want coins that are associated with a known bad address. Like, I don't want the Mt. Gox guy to send me money because I'm now on the FBI watch list. And so you'll pay more. You'll pay a premium for clean coins. And so what criminal enterprises are doing is by mining and getting these clean coins, they transfer the asset without transferring it on the network. So they just give you the password. So I have a coin, and I create it. It's completely clean. I can just give you the password. Now you have control of that asset. It's yours, but it's absolutely clean. It's untraceable. Same with gambling sites. So if I can launder through a gambling site, it's a clean coin. That clean coin carries a premium on the black market because that's very easy to bring back into fiat because it's very safe. But again, the asset doesn't have to be transferred on the network. The asset could be me emailing you my private key. And you could take that private key and email it to anybody else. So there's the technology, and then there's the physical reality of just being able to share passwords. Yeah.
And Alex, you talked about you were working with the police college to try and, I think your words were, wake the police up to the problems with crypto. Can you expand on what it is you're referring to? I mean, what are the, other than what we've talked about, are the problems that you're trying to get police to take notice of?
Yeah. Well, basically what we saw is, most of the frontline officer, and let's face it, they're dealing with domestic, giving tickets. I know you hate that ticket part, but, just be present in the community. And once in a while, they're going to get, obviously, a call regarding cryptocurrency, or they get a ransomware. And basically, as soon as they heard the word ransomware and cryptocurrency, they just, well, it's too much. The education level is not present. We start to work on that a little bit better. And sometimes, even if it's hard to trace, having knowledge that, you have maybe resources that maybe help you do that. And not all the ransomware you can recover. There's, basic principle we tell them, say, don't shut down a computer because maybe the password is in the RAM. Maybe a forensic examiner can recover that. But there's a website basically helping people to recover. And sometimes just for the police officer to help the community or the citizen or the victim, it's basically say, listen, we're going to gather your information. We might see a pattern, but we need to do that. And then here's some resource to help you. However, people don't even report it. Okay, it's underreported. We're working on solution like the NC3U unit. basically to do that, the Anti-Fraud Center, but it's, be a victim and report it's volunteer. So, we cannot put resource if we're not there, and we need to be more present in this type of forum like today, and basically say, okay, what's your issue? Because I'm always asking people, say, if I ask in your room, say, how many of you have been victim of violent crime? Just don't raise your hand, but I figure out not that many. But if I, or somebody have been victim. But if I ask how many people have been defrauded or know somebody have been victim, usually you get a lot more response. But the weight that we put on that as a response, as a police force, is not equivalent. But obviously we put more weight on terrorism file than on a fraud case because of life is at stake. But again, we need to still be engaged doing that. Mm-hmm. But it's if we don't share the knowledge and we're not engaged with you guys, then we fail our mandate too.
And I guess the hesitance may come from, as I've the change, because in the old days before crypto, there was good reason to report it to the police because there was a trail of the money, and the police or civil litigation counsel could sort of help you get to that pot of money, and it's not always successful. But I think these days there's a sense among victims of commercial crime that reporting to police may not go anywhere. And have you had success in sort of putting together the pieces of the puzzle?
CRA had some success regarding that, but mostly they go back to what's the indicator of the fraud or what it is that they are. The people live higher life than they should, and basically trace it back and be able to arrive at the scene and basically do that. We had some FBI had great success, but it's time consuming. Like over time since 2010, there's about 104 darknet market, and they only last about 8 months. They shut down very fast. They're not long lived. So again, money laundering and those cryptocurrency are moving very fast, and it's hard to follow. And limitation. Let's face it. We have the case of Jordan. Basically, we have 18 months for summary offense or 30 months for an indictable offense to close a case. So I will give you an example. One of my files was the CRA heartbleed file. And we seized all the computer. We know what's going on. We were lucky because the VPN dropped and we can find the location of that individual. But the problem is when we arrive, it's the time consuming, and we had about 6 guys doing forensic on all the mobile device, and most of the crypto is changed to mobile device. But when we arrived there, we face technical difficulty, try to find the virtual machine, if it can change money, but we know he had all the information about that. But because of the 30 months period, we basically end up in front of the judge, say, listen, if you will add a financial nexus on that, we could have had higher sentencing. But right now, 18 months. That's it, probation. But having financial nexus, we can prove, and we suspect it was the case, then he will have probably a couple of years. So a little bit frustrating for our part, but it's not just us, it's you guys, it's our community after all. So that's what we need to focus on what we can do.
And so we've heard a bit about how the crypto is being used for money laundering. What about how is it being used for other criminal activity? Jazz, or do you want to start and then we'll go to Rodney? Or?
There's the tax evasion was one of the ones, trade sanctions, stuff like that. So there's a lot of news about kind of North Korea and Iran using cryptocurrency to kind of evade some of the trade sanctions. You run into, like, that kind of falls apart when you have to convert back to fiat, because that becomes very difficult. But if you have somebody, like, I mean, if you use Venezuela as an example, not necessarily related to trade sanctions or anything, but just moving money out of the country, you have to go to Colombia in order to do that. So with Iran, you would have to have something similar in order to kind of move any value from within Iran out. As far as tax evasion, that's an interesting one just because of the kind of, I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard of the market and what it did in 2017. And so some of the tax kind of burden that comes with that, I don't know how that was actually handled, but it becomes it becomes more difficult, especially from a CRA perspective, because that lack of transparency is there. And following those funds, so like me as a Canadian, I interact with, say, Kraken, which is a cryptocurrency exchange, a rather large one. When I dealt with them years ago, their banking was based in Japan because that was where they could get a bank account. And so I had to send money out of Canada. I get my crypto. And then if I were to cash out, I would have to receive a wire from Japan into my Canadian bank account. Now, me being an AML person, I know where all the thresholds lie for reporting and everything else. So I would probably do that at a lower scale. So it becomes difficult, but at the conversion point back into fiat, you really run into the current anti-money laundering space because the legislation is aimed at fiat currency.
The other aspect, I guess, it's what we saw. So those who have exchangers, the exchanger is probably doing, everything right. But the people behind, as you mentioned, Jan, they might pay their employee with cryptocurrency. They might buy their appliance and all their need through cryptocurrency. So they don't really declare that to the CRA. So this is another angle for that. But yeah, the big thing, like even with the crypto ruble, let's try to get out of those international sanctions. That's it's getting more and more. So,
Jazz, what else could you add to that?
I think part of the problem is it's not really clear who has to pay what taxes and when. Like, we had all the crypto billionaires, who came to the accounting firms and said, help us. We have lots of crypto. What country should we live in? Legitimately. As in, we're going to change this to fiat. When we change it to fiat, that's when we think we have to pay taxes because nobody's telling me what taxes I have to pay or who I have to pay. I bought $1,000 worth of Bitcoin when it was worth 10 cents. And that's worth a few $1 million now. So there's a lot of legitimate people that are getting caught up in, in what they're supposed to pay in tax. And unfortunately, it's not very clear. There's not very clear legislation. Is it an investment? Is it a cash asset? What kind of tax should you pay? What country do you pay the tax in? So if I use it for vacation and pull it out in another country, what implications does that have for even money laundering? But I think the key here is the criminals don't want fiat. It's legitimate people who want fiat. The criminals want to keep it in digital. There's no transaction fees for moving your money. It's free. You get to keep the entire value of your money. It's not dependent, unless it's a stable coin, on any government-backed currency. So if the US goes down, great. The euro goes down, who cares? You're sitting on your own currency. And it fluctuates ridiculously, which criminals love. So there's a lot of benefit in keeping crypto in crypto. This obsession with moving it to fiat is a legitimate person problem, and not a criminal enterprise problem. And the proof is in the fact that they'll pay a premium for clean coins. Because that is the best way to, if they do need to pay for services, they can. And what we're seeing is, the gig economy is only helping. You can get a house in Airbnb for a month and live there. You can get a rental car and pay for that with Bitcoin and live there. And you can pay for your groceries. You can buy prepaid cards anonymously. And prepaid is a great money laundering device, completely anonymous, reloadable with Bitcoin through exchanges. And you can pay for purchases, with cash. Nobody wants fiat anymore. People can live in the digital world quite effectively. Yeah.
So when you go to those exchanges, though, to load the card, so we talked a bit about it before. So some exchanges, they sort of vary in terms of how much information they'll require from you to do that. Take us through the spectrum of sort of the best version of the exchange, sort of being the most, requiring the most information to the other end of the spectrum.
So a regulated, like Coinbase is an exchange that when you sign on, you have to provide identity information and you have to validate an account. You have to provide a check, some of the things you do with others. But there's open marketplaces for prepaid cards and gift cards, where you can go to Kijiji and buy a gift card from somebody who bought a Bay card and they don't want it. So there's no regulation there, right? And I can buy whatever I want and I can pay those people in Bitcoin. So you can absolutely not trace, small amount of layering and laundering. And especially now that you can buy reloadable prepaids, they're completely anonymous in some instances, depending on who you purchase them from. and you can transfer them and give them to anybody. So they're fully anonymous.
But in those exchanges where identity is required, like what level are we talking about? Because it's not the same level, as I understand it, but correct me if I'm wrong, that a bank would require from you to sort of prove your identity.
I think it really varies by exchange, right? So there's regulated exchanges out there that are meeting the standard. But again, just like ICOs, there's exchanges that come up really fast that are not even regulated, don't even have a license to operate, but they, with a computer, and a bank account, they can change your crypto to currency. And they operate for like 6 months, 8 months, and someone finds out and shuts them down. But they charge us an enormous fee, 15, 20, 30%, and they get away with it for a period of time. And then, when they do get caught, it's almost worth it sometimes.
Yeah, I find a lot of Canadian exchanges specifically, because that's my area, have been begging for the regulation that's about to come out in June, or supposed to be coming out in June, that it's nice to have some guidelines. Like I said, I've been working in that space since 2013. We've worked with numerous exchanges, and they've all implemented a voluntary compliance program because they want to appear as legitimate as possible, most of them with the hope that they could actually get a bank account. And that kind of talks to like whether a bank level, I would argue that a large portion do, because there's pretty clear guidelines as far as what a bank has to do to identify their customers. But to Jazz's point, there are a lot that don't operate above board and don't want to collect that information, and news travels really quickly if you're looking for somewhere that you don't have to be ID'd, where you can go.
And so maybe you can tell us, like, what's the current state of regulation in Canada, and then where are we going to in June, or whenever it does come into force?
Current state is virtual currency currently isn't included in any of the specific anti-money laundering, the Proceeds of Crime Money Laundering Act. It is not included in there currently. As of June, they will put digital currency in there, but we're still waiting for the definition from Bill C-31, which was out in 2015, of what a dealer in virtual currency is. But there will be reporting standards. There's new reports that will be coming out as far as virtual currency transactions of $10,000 or more. There will be identification thresholds. Basically, a cryptocurrency exchange will be treated as a money services business based on kind of word on the street. That's what it appears it will be.
And where do we stand as against the rest of the world in terms of that kind of regulation? So are there sort of what are we seeing in other parts of the world for that kind of regulation, including digital currency and anti-money laundering legislation? Do you know? Maybe Alex, you can.
While everybody's behind, I will say, the anti-money laundering law, especially promoted by FATF, basically, they have great standard, and most of the country try to obey them. Cryptocurrency is definitely left behind. I know that in Ireland they are, great at it on the financial side, but the crypto side they have nothing. And just the fact that even the know your customer policy, some of them, because of the standard of the exchanger, basically they ended up having we follow all the policy. They get a picture of the ID, but you can fake the ID. Some will have an ID plus the real picture of the person they request. So the standard need to be raised. The bar need to be raised to basically identify the individual even for fiat as for crypto also. So.
Jazz, other than sort of this change in the regulations, what else is being identified as a key step to dealing with these problems of digital currency, of cryptocurrency?
I mean, regulations only help honest people, to be honest. They'll really help the legitimate cryptocurrencies that are trying to, do things right. They're not purposely trying to launder money. They have a very good business model. It's very profitable. They can make a large amount of money converting this through fees. The problem is regulation is so slow. So even in countries where there is regulation, they set up shop for 6 months, 8 months, and it's enough. You can make enough money in 6 to 8 months, to then disappear and do it somewhere else. Because again, the barrier to entry is so low. Setting up an exchange And this is where I guess a lot of people in the room from the banking community, may realize that they can't do that without a bank account. So all of these exchanges have a bank account, and they've been given license to borrow funds to be able to exchange to fiat. So there is risk that financial institutions are carrying by taking on these exchanges as customers as well. And so I would say, some of the responsibility, maybe not from a regulatory perspective, but just from a global citizen perspective, lies in those financial institutions from giving them funds in the first place, and monitoring the access to those funds. Unfortunately, because they're very profitable, they're paying back all the loans and getting all the insurances, and they're a very attractive client. So there's definitely some more work financial institutions should be doing, but regulation, I can't see them being fast enough to ever catch up. Yeah.
And that's an interesting point, sort of on the financial institutions playing a role here. So, but what would be the red flags? Like, presumably, if this is an exchange that doesn't intend to sort of be above board, they're not going to the financial institution and disclosing that. So how is a financial institution supposed to identify indicators that, wait a minute, these people may be setting up an exchange and we don't want to be a part of that?
And I think that's really where a lot of confusion comes with financial institutions, because if you were normally evaluating a business, you would evaluate the owners and operators of that business, the technology platform that they have to vet the viability before you lend them something. With crypto, people just don't know. So, Bitcoin, who created Bitcoin? Satoshi Nakamoto, we can't find them, don't know who they are. Who manages the code? Oh, it's open source. There's 100 people, we have no control over them. They argue all the time and create new protocols and create forks. So it's a very unknown space. It's not normal for our financial institutions to evaluate this type of risk. I would really focus on personally the security aspect of that organization. And that's, again, very hard for a salesperson from a financial institution who's trying to sell them a product and service to do that kind of evaluation. But that really is where the risk lies. The risk lies in their obligations to meet regulatory compliance. And if they don't, they could be a significant reputational risk to you if you do bank them as a financial institution. Yeah.
And Rodney, what do you say about that? If just picking up on this point, would you think there are any other sort of indicators that a financial institution should look at when potentially doing business with these exchanges?
Using kind of Quadriga as an example, if anybody hasn't heard of Quadriga, they were a Canadian exchange that the owner passed away out of country. He apparently had the only keys to the cold wallet. It was found out later that the cold wallet was empty as of April of 2018, which has made kind of recalling those coins or tracing them or anything else fairly difficult because there was almost a year of lead time. Red flags as far as that specific case would be how, and this is part of a problem for them because they had banking issues. So they had numerous accounts and they had numerous accounts closed. With their particular flow of funds, it was a lot of money coming in and immediately going out. It was a lot of very low deposits, which for a cryptocurrency exchange doesn't really make sense because you would have customers paying in and buying Bitcoin. Then you would have to go and purchase more Bitcoin. But usually the flow, it's tricky because those flows do look like they look red flag when you look at them, because there would be a lot of cash in and then a big dump of it out, but that would be all of your clients paying into your account and then you going out and purchasing more Bitcoin and flowing in. The full transparency of that, if you are openly banking a cryptocurrency exchange, is you want to see both sides of that transaction. You don't want to just see the bank account piece that you have access to. You want to see where those funds are going. So in the case where the funds flow in and then all of a sudden they clear out, you should theoretically be it should not be hard to trace that purchase. You should be able to show you their wallet to see 500 Bitcoin flow into their cold wallet. The red flags, as far as that's concerned, that's one of the trickier parts, is because it is used for illegal things. And some of those process flows look fairly difficult, but with more transparency, you can dig a little deeper than you normally would traditionally, but it is difficult.
And Alex, anything you, just on this topic of financial institutions and questions they may ask or things they should require so that they're sort of not being sort of brought into this unknowingly, into this problem, into the criminal element, what would you say?
Well, I will say it's go back to basic customer due diligence. A lot of people are going to stay behind and say, oh, I followed the standard. It's good if you're stay in your country and maybe good, but if, example, if you want to deal with in the United States and you want, and they might ask you a question and say, can you prove that the currency is where it's coming from? Then now you have a problem. They say, well, you cannot bring that money in this country because we don't trust it. Because it's not just, we talk about criminal activity, but there's also the other part of the terrorism. And as you know, especially in the United States, it's a really touchy subject about that. So they will raise those questions about how you assert where the money is coming from. So that's why it's important to raise the bar about the standard. Just keeping to the minimum will probably not cut it in a few years. So.
And what are the other sort of jazz, moving forward? So we know that the crypto is being used for criminal activity, and we know that sort of the legislation is trying to catch up, and maybe it will sort of catch up a little bit. What else can be done? What else is being identified as options to address the use of crypto in the criminal element?
So I actually think crypto has a bad name. For example, when the Silk Road got shut down, Silk Road was a very big, we talked about these marketplaces. Jamie Dimon once said, crypto was only for like drug dealers and assassins. So Silk Road was where all the drug dealers and assassins were. So this was like their spot to kind of meet and exchange and do stuff. And essentially when they took the Silk Road down, they expected a huge drop in volume of Bitcoin trading and cryptocurrency trading in general. Because they thought like 50% of all this stuff is bad people. And actually, it only dropped close to 10%. And I would argue you take any instrument in banking, and 10% is probably being used for bad stuff. Cash, debit cards, take anything, check. So, in some ways, cryptocurrencies have a bad name in that they're just like every other currency. 90+% of the people are legitimate. They're holding funds for investment purposes. They're using it because it's easy to remit money back home and not pay fees. They're using it to get stabilization from their home currencies where they're worried about, if you think crypto is crazy, there's countries where it's worse. So they're worried about, the president printing money overnight and devaluing their currency. So there's many other reasons people hold crypto. And I'd say if we can treat it just like we do any other currency and asset with regulation and banking, financial institutions allowing people to bank with them, you'd stop the marketplace for these fly-by-night exchanges. As a legitimate user, I would rather go to my bank and buy my crypto and trade my crypto and give my ID and pay my taxes. But I don't actually have that option. So I think, acceptance of this is just another form of currency, will actually go a long way to legitimizing it. But there's still a lot of fear in the marketplace around this as a type of currency. And and some of the media, around this has kind of made that worse. But I think if we could get it into Main Street banking, which kind of defeats the purpose of Bitcoin from a clearing and settlement perspective, I just mean incorporating it into your options that you give customers. Like in Western Union money, maybe I could Bitcoin money to somebody for significantly less fees and a smaller amount. That would help legitimize not only the use, but the regulation and the management of risks. Because financial institutions are always going to be better than an exchange that opened yesterday. Even if it's run by 5 people who owned, ranked financial institutions. They're not going to do it at the same rigor. They don't have the same investment. They don't have the same moralities. And so I'd like to see it back into legitimate enterprise.
I think that's twofold as well, in that with that access, you kind of move away from the counter indicators. So as I was saying before, is that like the flow may look suspicious, but with transparency, it's not. And having the ability to kind of not have to take cash because you don't have a bank account and stuff like that, you can make it easier to find the people who are actually doing bad things because they stand out like a red flag. And so those things, with that access to banking and that support, it becomes easier to actually sort through who's doing the bad stuff versus the people that just want to be legitimate.
So let's maybe expand on that. How would they stand out?
Well, there's transaction red flags. I mean, it's similar to kind of the money services business space. I work in that space a lot, and there's a laundry list of indicators from FinTrack that say these are things that you would consider suspicious. And I have customers who haven't been banking for 3 years, and they still deal with remittance. They deal 100% in cash, and that would create a giant black hole in any sort of investigation, because now they've moved out of the traditional finance space where you can not very easily, but you can reasonably track someone's activities. And if you allow the access, you allow that transparency.
Alex, anything to add on this?
Well, mentioning about the address, one of the things is taking place right now to track it back to those bad addresses. Obviously we go on tour, we go on the dark net market, and we scrape all those address that they say send me money there. Then automatically those addresses are red flag. So even when we see it later in the transaction with that open ledger, the blockchain, then you can say likely it's been at one point in a bad, it was bad money used for money laundering or for drugs or other stuff. So there's the beauty of that ledger. Obviously, if we have better control, it will gain credibility if it will transit by bank or things like that. So, it's not like we can say and we can forget about that. You can't. It's here to stay. So, might as well find a way to deal with that and have it make it legal and acceptable. So.
But even doesn't it? I can see how. So if you make it accessible and we can, a legitimate user can go into their bank and purchase crypto. How does that change or impact the use of crypto by the criminal element? I mean, because they're not going into the bank and doing it. They're like, how do we address that risk? And if at all, maybe you don't.
No, I think, to speak to the other points, I think what you've done is you've taken, if 90% of the traffic is legit,
Yeah.
and let's say I've associated my debit card at CIBC with my crypto account now the regulators have somewhere to go to say, who is this person? And now you can, with the right mechanisms, with privacy and confidentiality in mind, they can get that information from CIBC. And so if 80% of the people transacting are associated with a financial institution, that public key is now no longer private. The regulators, the authorities, with the right protocols that are in place today, so you can't just call a bank and get the info, but if you have a legitimate cause and you provide the right paperwork, law enforcement can get that information. What that leaves is that 10% or 15% of the population that is not associated. So now you have to find crime in a smaller pot, right? And so there'll still be legitimate people in there for some reason, or hiding funds for maybe not money laundering, like a pending divorce or whatever else, right? But what we're really interested in is the large-scale money laundering. And if you narrow the pot of places we have to look, we're going to be more efficient in finding it.
And I think to that point that, not all criminal, not every cartel on earth has moved to Bitcoin because it's easier. There's still a lot of, cash-related or fiat-related money laundering. So I think closing those gaps between the two. So if I can, at one institution, have crypto and fiat and do the investigation as I would in both, in the traditional traditional financial service area, but I can tie in crypto as well, you actually should theoretically get a better perspective of what is going on full circle, instead of having two separate silos that are comparing each other.
And anything else, so sort of legitimizing the crypto, its regulations, anything else that you'd add to sort of how do we move forward? How do we address the use of crypto in the criminal world?
Well, I will say that, for the country we want to follow those regulations, it's an issue. But as soon as you go offshore and you go to other country, then the only way it can do is having a sanction that we cannot deal with you, because obviously we know that likely as long as you don't follow those rules, then slowly it's going to go there. Or is there going to be always somebody who wants to try to, push the system and the limit? Absolutely, we know that. It's human nature. But again, it's in our advantage if we know that that money is going to, we lose tax, we lose our social fabric because we trade with them because it's convenient. Well, we are kind of agreeing indirectly that those are, things that we accept, but we have consequence with that too.
Well, I've left 10 minutes for questions, because I think this is quite a hot topic, and I want to make sure that we're addressing sort of things that you may have in your mind that haven't been addressed yet. Do we have any questions? Oh, good. Okay, start over here.
Well, Bitcoin's pseudonymous, but Monero and Zcash are virtually perfectly anonymous. Why not just make them illegal? Why try and rely on AML and CTF regulation? Some countries have done that. Why not just try that?
So sorry, did everyone hear the questions?
Why not just make the currencies illegal,
Yeah.
especially the purely anonymous ones?
Yeah, why not make the currencies illegal? Why try to sort of legitimize them?
So again, I think there's some currencies out there that have been set up for a bad purpose and had bad intentions from the beginning. And whether they were doing this on crypto, or they were doing it with stocks, or they were doing it with other forms of currency, they would have done the same thing. So, I don't think you're really going to stop bad activity by making crypto illegal. And the reason is there's a lot of institutional investors that want to participate in the market. It's a highly volatile market that has a potential for significant gains. And you're seeing a large-scale movement of exchanges getting certified, getting things like SOC 2 certification. We just certified an exchange in the US, Gemini, with SOC 2 certification. So there's legitimate reasons that people want to participate in this infrastructure. And if you think about when Bitcoin became popular and when it really took off, it was 2008, 2009. Lack of trust in the central authorities, lack of trust in financial institutions, questioning why there's such large fees to send money abroad, questioning the need for all of the regulation and centralization of data when there's large-scale data breaches at those institutions. So I think the public perception and the need for a non-centralized, government-controlled currency was there. Because if it wasn't, nobody would have bought crypto. It's not there just because of criminals. It would never be able to substantiate to the size it has been so far. So I think there's a very legitimate reason and need for cryptocurrencies. I think in developing countries, to be able to do microtransactions with no fees is huge. If I can go, in India, you buy one cigarette, one stick of gum. When you drink the pop, you got to give the bottle back because they get a deposit for it. Bitcoin facilitates those types of transactions, makes life very easy, takes away the middleman. As a global citizen, I see a great need for crypto. And I value it as an opportunity to participate. But like I said, just like everything else, it doesn't have more bad people in crypto than in any other currency. So I would say, just like banning cash. Cash is probably the worst for money laundering. Why wouldn't you ban cash first?
And I think the other side of that is the people that really want the Monero and the Zcash for the privacy function. Not absolutely, but potentially want it for illegal purposes. Making something illegal to stop criminals isn't really stopping anything. So there's that struggle. The other, it being a decentralized open source project, you can't shut that code down. So it's a struggle.
We have some more hands. Yes, over here.
The question was about the exchange part of it. So anyone setting up an illegal exchange also means that there's somebody who they're paying in cash to buy the crypto. How does that thing actually work in the sense like, yeah, I can go and say I set up an exchange in South America, one of the South American countries, and yeah, it's illegal exchange. Somebody wants to exchange the money, so yeah, somebody give me a Bitcoin. Where does the cash come from that scenario? I want that cash to be traceable.
And so that really is the problem. The barrier to entry.
Maybe just repeat the
Sorry, the question
yeah.
was, how do you set up an exchange? Where does the cash initially come from? And the problem is the barrier to entry is really low. Let's say I have $10,000 and I buy $10,000 worth of Bitcoin. Once I have it in Bitcoin, I can now sell that $10,000, not in Bitcoin, in any currency that you want if you give me cash. So I have a window front with my phone, and you show up. I show you how to get an app. You get an app. You give me $100 in cash. I give you $80 worth of Bitcoin. I transfer it to you right away. So all I need to set up is a very small amount of deposits. I mean, now if you're setting up an online exchange and you're expecting lots of volumes, you need more than $10,000. But in my extreme example, that's all you really need to set up an exchange. Now, if you need more money, you're generally going to go get a bank account. And that is where I say there's a great opportunity to reduce crime. Because I could have borrowed that $10,000 as a business loan to buy my first Bitcoin. and then facilitated all this money laundering, unbeknownst to the financial institution. And that's really where the problem lies. Yeah.
So basically, that is exchange owner's money. It's not getting from third parties. It's just the exchange owner's money.
Yeah, you don't have to set up a merchant license. You don't have to apply for anything. If you have a working device that's connected to the internet, you're ready to go.
And the getting rid of cash, you just deal with traditional money laundering. So you have an exchange, and then in your bar, you have a white label ATM that people pay you cash. It goes into the white label ATM, and then people take the cash out to buy booze at your bar. You've now got two legitimate streams of income with that illegal money.
Yeah, to become a trader is too easy. There's no regulation. There's nothing. If you want to just have fun, just go on the on the Bahamas website to try to create an international business, and it's going to cost you $4,000. And basically, you're gonna have personal, you're gonna have representing, you're gonna have professional, $4,000. So it's not much, and you get a full business, So, and they even have phone service to say the boss is not there. Leave a message. Okay.
We had some, back in the back?
When you mentioned about the fraudulent exchange and the lifespan of 8 months and then closed down, were there any sort of success stories with law enforcement or trials to act faster and within this 8 months, 1 month window and try to enforce on some of these actions?
Well, yeah, there's a few story. Work on a case of dark code, basically in a file that basically we shut it down. It was an exchange to basically have the trend was mostly doing ransomware, that the business were really giving a headache to a Tylenol because they lose all their data. And basically at the end of the day, we're able to shut down in the participation of 70 countries. There's other projects that took place, but there's some of them, they don't even last 2-3 months. They are defraud. They decide to shut it down themselves. So there's a lot of different reasons why it's not sustainable for them, because it's require a lot of energy to do that. I know the France and the FBI and the Netherlands also shut down about 9 at the same time, while everybody was involved in the same. So that was easy. But it's go back to investigational technique. Basically, usually it's going to be, or we're going to take over an account of one of the person is involved, and we're going to start to gather the information. But as soon as you go to the more advanced, like the ransomware, you need to go on the the pirates website, that you need to authenticate with somebody who will trust you. Then they basically a little bit harder to get in, obviously. And right now, even ransomware, we start to see a decline, and it's moved more by basically people do a Bitcoin mining. They basically have botnet hacking your computer and basically mine Bitcoin on your behalf, but you don't get any of the money. And basically that's what's taking place. So it's all go back to infiltration, but traditional policing, again, like money laundering case. So, answer your question, sir?
We have a question here in the front.
Very final. I was reading a report by Thomson Reuters that was saying that in Europe, not in
Maybe so just raise your voice, maybe, so people can hear.
shady jurisdiction, authorities seize 1% of criminal proceedings. So you could say that criminals have a 99% ratio of success, and most of that using fiat. So my question is to fit the sort of the question is, do you see potential for blockchain technology to actually be used as a tool to prevent financial crime?
So just so everyone heard, do you see blockchain technology being used as a technology to prevent financial crime?
So personally, I think if there was the same level of transparency in the implementation of it, so it's not one of these hidden ones, and you could actually track money movement, including all currencies, I think it would uncover a vast amount of financial crime. Just having full transparency into where something's coming and going would be huge. As you guys know now, through correspondent banking, and you know the money left, you have no idea where it ended up. And then the investigation to find that is months, not days. To investigate the full flow of transactions on the Bitcoin network, even if I hadn't got it downloaded, it wouldn't take me a day. I could draw you the full map, and if I have it downloaded, I could draw you the full map in about 4 minutes, right? Like start to finish. And so That's why everyone knows there's these bad operators that are sending money to each other, but there's nothing you can do because they're just, the seller's playing the buyer. The end amount that gets converted to fiat is only the payments to the low end of the pole. And so I think that level of transparency would be phenomenal. You question what the value of central banking then would be.
Okay, I think we have time for one more quick question. We have one over here.
Based on what you're saying right now, it seems that the human intellect is a key part in making a decision whether this is money laundering or not. And the question that I have, are you familiar with any applications that are using neural networks or artificial intelligence that are used for fighting money laundering using cryptocurrency?
Well, right now we are still at the machine learning phase, I guess, in the computer world. We're not at the AI completely. RankBrain is a good example. Google algorithm to find, you log in and they basically have a good idea what it is. This is going to be the second phase AI, and probably the next phase will be quantum computer. But now everything will be out the window at that time. But basically we are behind. There's no doubt because we're limited by the technology that offered to us. So. Answer questions?
Okay,
Yeah.
well, we
We can talk after too.
Yeah, we're out of time. Thank you very much, and thank you to the panelists. I think that was very interesting. And I'm not sure if they're around to answer any sort of questions that we didn't have time for now, but thank you very much.
Thanks.